So I've recently just pretty much become a fan of the Saw franchise. I'd seen the first one before, but it was quite a while ago. And then I didn't really bother after that. Pretty much until a few weeks ago, a few friends and I decided to just binge the whole franchise. Apart from Spiral, because one, I've seen it before, and two, it's the worst one easily. And I did not want to watch it again. But the franchise itself is probably like the most convoluted, messy, and ridiculously silly set of films you could possibly watch. From start to finish, really fun, apart from Spiral. So going into Saw X, I was definitely looking forward to this. You know, with the return of Jigsaw and even Amanda. It was definitely something I was looking forward to watching. But it's definitely not what I was expecting from this franchise at all. I mean, Tobin Bell is fantastic as always. For me, he is the real selling point of this franchise. But the rest of the film it's really odd. I mean, from what I know, this takes place either between the first and second films or the second and third, but I'm not too sure really. And we essentially follow John Kramer off to Mexico as he's trying to get a cure for his cancer. However, he's mugged off, and all those that faked him are now his next victims. But it's definitely the first the franchise that's made me feel depressed and sad. The first half an hour of this film, you were just watching this dying John Kramer struggle just to do anything. He's pretty much this last ditch effort to saving his life with this treatment, and then of course the inevitable downfall where he gets duped by these guys and loses all his money and all this stuff. And it's quite just depressing really. You do actually quite feel sorry for this guy. He just kind of wants a bit of his life back, but he's completely screwed over by these people. But then after that we do return to normality a bit. We return to a dingy warehouse with a bunch of people ready to be, not brutally murdered, because they do also have the chance at living, but, the traps are back. There is a quick trap at the start, close to the start of the film, which is really interesting. It's on the post, I think there's even a clip of it that they use, with the eyes. But it's weird, because it's essentially just a dream sequence. Really odd. I've never seen that before in one of these films. But then the ones in the warehouse, they're fine. They're good little traps. Though I think two of them, they seem quite inescapable, which is the whole against Jigsaw's rules. There's these two traps that have these little extra steps at the end that seem a little bit harsh. One's you've got cut your own leg off, but then you also have to get bone marrow out your leg, and it goes through this tube and has to a certain amount of bone marrow for you to live. But okay, fair enough. But if you've just lost your legs, you really want a load of bone marrow to stop you from being decapitated, and it's really moves quite slowly as well. It's a bit harsh. And the second one's worse. I think it's a trap that essentially will enclose on your face and burn your head off. But first you have to pick up a bit of your brain tissue, put it in a little glass that dissolves it, and then another thing will fill up to a certain point, and you'll be it doesn't release the traps straight away. It then releases a key, which the key then is used to release the trap. I mean, that little bit there seems a little bit kind of pointless. The guy's already lost a bit of his brain, all this stuff. You don't really need to make him have to use a key and get himself out. But then once that's done, it is our twist time. With this franchise, you always have a good old twist for the most part. They're always pretty much hilarious, or sometimes pretty much impossible. But with this film, it's basically neither. It's quite predictable twist actually, which is a really big shame. When you see this patient that John meets when he's first introduced to the doctors, and of course this guy turns out to be in on it the whole time. And his character as a whole is just a bit annoying as well. He appears halfway through the game and just kind of ruins the whole thing. But his presence himself is just a bit annoying. Just really, with these films, you just kind of want to watch a bunch of people go through some traps. You don't really want this guy to take them all hostage and put them in their own trap, which is what happens. They really force the fact that John Kramer in this situation is the real good guy. He gets put into his own trap essentially by the main woman who was in charge of the whole scam. But her character as a whole, that she has no real motivations. I mean, the only one I could think of was money, but from what the film tells you, her dad is really, really rich, so it doesn't really make much sense. And then they also have this kid that John helps when he first gets to Mexico, like, by helping him, like, fix his bike, and he just kind of, like, reappears when, like, the big climax is happening. So she goes out, kidnaps him, and puts him in one of these traps with John. And then, like, the trap itself is like, it like waterboards its victims. Well, no, the lady says it's bloodboarding. Real good little one-liner there. So she just essentially just puts John, an old, frail, dying cancer patient, and this little kid who has nothing to do with any of this, into this Chinese waterboarding trap. But of course, this was all a dupe, as by the time you get round to it, you know, this is a trap for two people. It's kind of obvious that this was meant for the last lady, so why would there be two aspects of this trap? But of course, you know, it's for John and Amanda, and the other two try and get the money. They get caught in another trap where gas comes in, they have to kill each other, blah, blah, blah. And then John, Amanda, and the kid walk out in what is essentially like this happy ever after moment. Fine, and boom, title, credits, that's Saw X. I mean, like, overall, it just didn't feel like a Saw film for me. The long length as well, it's like the longest of the franchise, like just around 2 hours. Pretty unnecessary. You have like the full-on like sequence where you see all the victims get kidnapped, which was never a thing anyway. You know, you may watch one of them get kidnapped, but not all of them, because it's pointless. You don't care how they all get to the situation they're in. The twist at the end, again, is really underwhelming and pretty poor, very predictable. And there's also some weird attempts at character building at points with Amanda and John that I would call them character building moments, but they're essentially just telling you things you already know if you watched the other films. So whatever, if you really want to include those, maybe make it a bit more different instead of being the same shit thrown at you before. But I mean, once you get past that first half an hour, that's quite just depressing. It's still a lot of fun to sit through, as it is, you know, at the end of the day, a Saw film. And with that, this gets a 1 out of 5. Have a good one.